She was pulled from her imagination by a gentle knock on the door, and Grandma popped her head around. "Hi, sweetheart. How you going on? Granddad said you'd found a box of your mum's books." Tilly nodded as her grandma stepped into the room and picked up a copy of A Little Princess. She held on to her chest like it contained a small part of her daughter in its pages. "I'm going to start thinking about dinner soon," she said, still hugging the book tightly. "Do you want to come down and help close the shop up beforehand? It's a bit chilly up here." Tilly nodded and followed Grandma downstairs. And even though she knew the kitchen would be empty, she couldn't help but picture opening the door to her mother. But as she went in and felt the warmth of the room envelop her, she rooted herself once again in the present. Later that evening, over a meal of chicken roasted with garlic and lemons and rosemary, with crusty bread and green beans, Tilly felt the hard gem of her sadness thaw a little, leaving questions as it melted. "Do you know what sort of books my dad liked?" she asked, and Granddad seemed to choke a little on his mouthful of bread. "I'm afraid not," Grandma said as she patted Granddad on his back. "We didn't really know him very well at all." "Do you think my mom would have known his favorite books?" Tilly asked. "Oh, I'm sure she did," Grandma said. "I'm sure they talked about books along with everything else you talk to the person you love about." "Why don't we have any photos of him?" "Well, for the same reason we don't know what his favorite books were. We just didn't get to spend much time with him before he died." "Do you think Mom left because my dad died?" "Oh, my love," Grandma said, "I don't know. It's the honest answer. I'm not going to pretend to you that it didn't break her heart not being able to be with your father for longer, or that she didn't spend a lot of time thinking about how things might have worked out differently. But then she had you. She had a little bit of him back again, and that's part of the reason why you were so precious to her." "I wonder which bits of me are from him," Tilly said. Granddad smiled. "Well, you didn't get your hair or your height from us, although I have a sneaking suspicion that you might have inherited your literary tastes from our side of the family." "But Tilly," Grandma said, "you may have a bit of him and a bit of her and a bit of all of us mixed in there, but the best bits of you are all your own, and that much I know. Now, whose turn is it to do the washing up?" When Tilly had been small, she had read with Granddad every night before she went to bed. Every evening after dinner, Tilly and Granddad would curl up on the big squishy sofa in front of the fireplace, and Granddad would read aloud a chapter or two of whichever book they were engrossed in. Together they had gone sailing on the swallows of the Amazons, and met witches of Miss Cackle's academy, and visited worlds balanced on the backs of elephants. As Tilly got older, the tradition of gradually faded. First they started reading their own books next to each other, exploring vast and separate worlds while sitting side by side. And then Tilly had started taking her books up to bed to read, and before she knew it, without anyone making a particular decision about it, they didn't read together anymore. Later that evening, with her mum's copy of Anne of Green Gables still closed, Tilly crawled out of bed and crept back downstairs. Her grandma was reading with a cup of tea at the kitchen table and looked up when Tilly came in. Seeing the book in Tilly's hand, she smiled and went back to her own. Tilly pushed the door to the shop open and saw Granddad on the sofa, lit up by the flickering light of the fire. She crawled up beside him and put her mum's copy of the book on his knee. Without saying anything, he put his arm around her, and when Grandma came through with 3 mugs of hot chocolate, he put his own book down and began to read.